Hi friends, and welcome back to my channel and welcome to my March wrap-up. So in today's video I'm going to talk about all the books I read in March, what I thought of them, and I will also share the shows I've been watching and the music I've been listening to. And just a heads up, we were blessed in March with pop culture, with shows, with album releases, so I'm very excited to get to that part. But first, we're gonna talk about the books, and we're gonna talk about some statistics. So in March, I read a total of 7 books, which I'm quite happy with. Not as many as I had hoped to get to, but I still feel like that's a very solid reading month. I read about 1,500 pages, so fewer pages than previous month, but that's because I read more audiobooks this month. So about almost 25 hours worth of audiobooks is what I listened to. If we look at the genres, 4 of the books I read were general fiction books, literary fictions, contemporaries, and then 1 romance, 1 mystery, and 1 non-fiction, which was a memoir. I read no fantasies in March, which feels a bit weird. And then if we consider the ratings, I gave 2 books 2 stars, 1 book 3 stars, 3 books 4 stars, and 1 book 5 stars. So I'm still going strong with keeping my streak of having at least 1 5-star read each month, and the average rating is then approximately 3.42. I'm gonna talk about the books I read in chronological order, so the order that I read them. Let's get to it. The first book I read was My Body by Emily Ratajkowski. This is a book I listened to as an audiobook, and this is the memoir I read. It's technically like an essay collection and autobiography in one. So it's written by Emily, or Emrata as she is called, or it's her nickname. She is an actor and a model who sort of blew up when she participated in the also famous Robin Thicke music video. I read this book because I was participating in the Tropical Readathon and I needed to read a book written by an actor. In this book, or in this essay collection, Emrata actually shares a lot of moments throughout her life. I really enjoyed this essay collection because it deals with a lot of topics such as feminism, sexuality, self-confidence, and I feel like Emily does a great job of sharing how complex these subjects actually are. I really liked how this essay collection portrayed the conflict between being a feminist but also wanting to be sexy and having self-confidence while fighting for female rights, and just the discussion of that. Obviously it's difficult to perhaps relate to Emily in many ways because she is gorgeous. She very quickly became a model, so it might not have the most relatability because of that, but I do still feel like being a woman is enough to be able to relate to her and the things that she's going through, or having similar experiences as her at least. She was the one narrating the audiobook as well, and you could hear in her voice that she got really emotional at times because how badly she was used by the industry as well, and how many people thought they had the right to her body when they obviously didn't. It's heartbreaking in many ways as well. I've really enjoyed getting to know Emily Rada more, and I think she's a very intelligent and smart woman, and I'm very intrigued to hopefully read more from her by the future and just follow her career. I know she has a podcast that is very uplifting. I gave this one 5 stars. I thought it was great and I highly recommend this one actually. Next book I read was The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Chbosky. I'm conflicted about this because this is a book that was huge 15 years ago maybe, I don't know, something like that. And it's a book that's entirely written in letters, so we're following our main character Charlie. He is struggling a bit with being an outsider. He doesn't have that many friends. And we're following him throughout one of his years in high school when he suddenly gets friends. And he also falls in love and he starts dating. And I feel like in some ways your typical high school experience, high school book. There are definitely heartfelt moments in this one. There are definitely some funny moments in this one. But for me, reading it now, it didn't hit the way I expected it to, considering how hyped this book is. Or how hyped it was years ago at least. For me it was just pretty plain, and I was occasionally bored as well. I can see why people love it and I can appreciate it for what it is, but for me it was just boring. So I ended up giving this book 3 stars. it was fine. The next book I read was Turtle Under Ice by Juleah del Rosario. I also read this one for the Tropical Readathon because it was the team book for the non-fiction poetry team. And this book is a fictional book, but it's written in verse. I think the main thing here is that books written in verse are simply not for me. I don't get why it was written in verse. I really don't understand the purpose of that. Basically, this is the story about a girl, I don't even remember her name, but she thinks that her sister has left them. But without really digging into why her sister left or why she might have left or something like that. So it's sort of like this very tragic story, but with circumstances that don't feel that extreme. The younger sister is devastated because it seems like her older sister ran away from home and left her all alone. And throughout the book, some other things are revealed about the family and some things the family is grieving and so on. Once again, I was bored by this one, unfortunately, and also, as I mentioned, I don't think books in verse are for me. So I actually only gave this one 2 stars, which sucks because I wanted to like it, I wanted to support it, but it just wasn't for me. It might be for someone else, but it wasn't for me. The next book I read or listened to was The Writing Retreat by Juleah Bartz. And this is a new thriller. I think it was quite recently released. It's a 2023 release. It's about a writer who goes to this writing retreat, as the book says, hosted by one of her favorite authors. We have our main characters. She goes to this retreat. I think there might be around 6 women or something being there, 6 or 8 women. Going to this retreat will also reunite her with her old best friend. So she had a best friend, they had a fallout, they haven't spoken in years, but now they're being reunited at this retreat. And as I mentioned, the retreat is hosted by one of their favorite authors, who is known for writing really daring, dark romances, thrillers, stuff like that. And they are challenged to write an entire book during this month that they are at the retreat, basically. But then some odd things start to happen. There are some disappearances and things go on from there. So it's definitely an atmospheric, suspenseful thriller. And I really did like it. I perhaps didn't care that much for the plot or the characters, but I liked the atmosphere. I thought the atmosphere of the book was really, really good. So I would recommend this one if you're looking for a fun thriller. It's sapphic as well. I gave this one 4 stars. The next book I read was Britt-Marie Was Here by Fredrik Backman. I mentioned in my TBR that I want to try and read one Backman book a month now until I've read all of his books, and this one was the next up. It is a standalone book, but Britt-Marie was also present in another one of Backman's books, basically. But in this book, Britt-Marie is going off on her own. She is moving to a new town to get a new job. She's been a housewife for 40 years, but after a fallout with her husband, she decides to get a job, which takes her to this little city called Bori. And in this Bori, they basically have nothing. Everything is shutting down. While being there, she gets to know some kids and some other people in this little town. And she somehow becomes the coach of the junior football team. As always with Backman's books, it's a wonderful story with many heartfelt moments, many great quotes. It's funny. I feel in many ways, this is one of the more relatable books by Backman. Mainly because of the situation that Britt-Marie was in and where that has left her, being so dependent on her husband for the last 40 years and then being betrayed by him and sort of getting to build yourself up from the ground, needing to learn new skills and all of that, and while also being still very much true to herself. I feel a lot of that is relatable in almost a scary way. Sometimes when I'm reading a Backman book, it's sort of I find people in my own life that I can sort of match with these characters. Even though it's probably one of the most relatable ones, I also feel it's one of those that is the most out there. It's a bit more quirky. I adore this one, as with all Backman books. It didn't hit me the same way as some of his other works, so I only gave this 4 star, but I do think it's an incredible read. I'm very excited to see the movie, actually, because I have not seen the movie. Following that book, I listened to One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This I listened to as an audiobook, and it's a romance where we are following a woman who was married to, I guess it kind of was her high school sweetheart, but one day he disappears. He goes traveling, he disappears, he doesn't come home, people conclude that he is dead, and she moves on with her life. She grieves him, but then she moves on. She falls in love again, and suddenly her old husband appears. So it's about this conflict of having two men she loved, but in different stages of her life, and basically who will she choose. I thought this was such a feel-good book. I adored the characters and their relationships. I thought the romance was great. Yeah, the characters are a tad bit too perfect, like both of the love interests are way too perfect and understanding. But it's also like what makes the book feel good and nice. So it's not perhaps a realistic book in that way. It was a really cute and cozy read. I'm very happy I listened to this. I know it's gonna be released as a movie soon as well, so I'm excited to see that one. And yeah, if you haven't picked this one up, I do recommend it if you're intrigued, because it was really beautiful. It was. The final book I read in March was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I have an entire themed vlog dedicated to this one. I made a vlog where I try to become dark academia while reading this book. If you want to hear more in-depth thoughts about this book, please check that one out. Where do I start with this one? I liked the first 50 or so pages of it. I was intrigued. I definitely understand why this is now known as like the dark academia book, because there's so much from this book that is a part of the aesthetic today. So I did enjoy it at first, but I quite quickly got quite bored with it. I don't have any issues with the writing, but the general plot and the characters they were all just very boring. I didn't feel connected. I couldn't support the characters because I didn't know who they were. So even though there are like major events happening in this book, I didn't really care. Perhaps I should share the plot first. We're following Richard, who goes to this new college, and he wants to enter this Greek literature class where only selected students get to attend. But he talks his way into this class. He needs to drop all of his other classes in order to join that class. And they are like 6 people with a very dedicated professor learning about Greek tragedies and the Greek language and so on and so on. But as Richard gets to know his peers more, he also sort of gets involved in a few messes that they are in. Let's say that, I guess. This book is very slow paced, and Donna Tartt seems to love descriptions, because there's about like 50 pages quite early on in the book when everyone's on winter break and we're following Richard during his winter break where he does nothing. And we get like every single detail from this excruciatingly boring winter break that he's having. And I don't get why, because it did nothing for the story, it did nothing for the plot or the characters. So I'm just like, why didn't we just skip that winter break and then get back to scenes when he's with his classmates again, because at least then we're getting some type of action. I don't understand the choice of sharing so many lame things with us. I ended up giving this book 2 stars. I don't regret it. I was so disappointed when I finished it. I was just rushing to complete it before the end of the month so I could count it for the readathons and stuff. Do I regret reading it? No, I don't, because now I don't need to wonder what this book could have been. But am I disappointed? Yes, because I expected so much more considering how hyped it is, how popular it is. Once again, I understand its contribution to the dark academia aesthetic. That makes 100% sense. But after reading this one and also trying the dark academia aesthetic, I'm just like, I'm a bit more meh about it, because these characters here, they aren't dark academia. They are just a gang of nerds trying to be something that they aren't, and just trying to put up some sort of front just to seem cool. The vibes and aesthetics of how they are dressing and like what they are showcasing is dark academia. The characters themselves are not dark academia, if that makes sense. I'm also coming to the realization that perhaps dark academia isn't for me. I gave this one 2 stars. I read Bunny, gave that 2 stars. Babel, 4 stars. I appreciate it for what it was. I didn't love it. I wasn't obsessed, but I thought it was a great book. That one, the characters felt dark academia because they were genuinely interested in the things they were learning and doing. But here it's more just like a front, just like a look. That's everything I read. Let's now talk about the things I've listened to and also watched. So let's talk about the TV shows I watched. Let's start with The Last of Us, which I think started in January but finished in March. I thought this show was so good. almost perfection. I watched this one with my friend. We like hung out every week and watched the latest episode together, which was so cute in itself, just us doing that. I thought this show was so good. I loved that it was slow, it was taking its time. The performance from the actors was incredible. And especially episode 9, probably one of the best things I've seen in like television ever. The storyline, the acting, the cinematography, everything about that was so creepy and so perfect. And it's honestly one of my favorite episodes of anything of all time. I thought that episode 9 was incredible. Episode 10 was definitely rushed. It was the shortest one in the entire season. It didn't leave me with that emotional impact that I first expected, but I'm very excited about the second season whenever that comes out. Highly recommend The Last of Us. It's not your typical zombie show if that's what you're expecting. It's a lot slower. It takes a lot of time sharing side character stories as well, which was fun and awful at the same time because it was heartbreaking. But I love this show. It made me cry, it made me laugh, and I had a great time just watching it with my friend as well. In March, we also got the new season of Shadow and Bone. I basically binged this during one weekend, I think. I loved the first season of Shadow and Bone, and I did love the second season as well. It's a mess, and we all know this, but it was messy, it was very rushed, extremely fast-paced, and some things just didn't make sense. But it was a hella good time and super entertaining. Obviously, I do prefer following the Crows compared to the Shadow and Bone storyline. And that's like nothing against the actors, but I just feel like the Crows are so much more entertaining to follow. I think the casting overall in the show is super good, especially the new casting of like Wylan and Nikolai I thought was great. I really do feel like all of the actors are doing a great job with the material that they have. I'm sad that it felt so rushed occasionally because we didn't really get a lot of that slow burn that is in the Six of Crows duology especially. And it was interesting because they sort of smushed book 2 and 3 of Shadow and Bone together for the second season. So it was definitely rushed and fast-paced, but I honestly think that's just more to blame Netflix or just the way streaming works nowadays. And I'm glad they rushed it in case we don't get a new season, because there are scenes I would have liked to see that we now got to see, which we perhaps wouldn't if they had slowed things down. I get why they are squeezing everything into one season to give the fans what they want, just in case the show doesn't get renewed. But it's sad that the way TV shows and streaming works nowadays makes it so that has to be done. I hope we get more content because I love these actors as these characters. I think they're doing great. Another show that is getting very popular right now is Daisy Jones and the Six, based on the Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I watched this one as well. I had an interesting journey with this one because I watched the first 3 episodes, thought they were alright, I didn't love it, I wasn't obsessed, but I kept thinking about them for some reason. And then they released some episodes every week and I always watched them. And like by the final 3 episodes, I was obsessed. So I do feel like it is a slow start to the show. It takes some time before Daisy meets the rest of the band, the Six, and that's a bit like, we always want them to get together and see what magic they're gonna make. I don't care that much about the story before they became Daisy Jones and the Six, right? And then the final 3 episodes were incredible, 100%. Episode 7 felt unnecessary, it was slow, it was boring, it felt more like a filler, but 8 to 10, immaculate. During those episodes 8 to 10, I feel like they also proved some of the casting choices, because I will admit that at first I found it difficult to buy Sam Claflin as Billy Dunn, but with time, seeing Sam's acting, I started to get it. Especially by that final episode, I was like, okay, this is why they casted him. Okay, now I see. And the thing is, this show has definitely stayed with me now as well. Like, I still keep thinking about this. I want more people to watch it so I can discuss the show with them, because it ended on such a high. It ended so well. It even made me cry. I didn't expect to get emotional, but I did. It was slow, not the best start, but then it just kept building and got better and better and better. And like, I want all the Daisy Jones and the Six merch now. I want the band tee, I want the LP. I don't even have a record player, but I still want the LP. I feel like I need to rewatch this actually because I loved it just that much. It's a very different vibe from the book. When I read the book, I thought it was hilarious. I had so much fun when reading the book. This show is a bit more toned down. It's definitely a very different vibe, but they still have so much quality in so many places. And I just adored the characters, especially as always the female characters. Daisy, Camilla and Karen. Love those women. They are perfect in the book and they are perfect in the show. Talking about Daisy Jones and the Six, let's do a segue to the music I've been listening to in March. Because with Daisy Jones and the Six, the show, they actually released an album. They released an album by this fictional band, which is the album that they create in the show. And it's called Aurora, and it is incredible. At first, wasn't that impressed, but then I started to put it on in the background while I was doing something like cleaning or hanging out or whatever, and I started to love it. And I think it's an incredible album actually. I really think the Aurora album by Daisy Jones and the Six, a fictional band, is amazing, and there's so much extra content here as well. We have like albums for each episode as well, and we also got like a bonus track, and it's been great. Like the music in this show slaps as well. Another album I have been obsessing over is the Endless Summer Vacation by Miley Cyrus. Our queen released her album in March, and oh boy have I listened to that one a lot. We all know I loved Flowers when it was released in January, and now getting the entire album, I think it's so good. There's like 1 or 2 songs I don't love, but the rest of them are great. I have multiple favorites of the album, but my faves are Flowers, obviously, You, Violet Chemistry, Muddy Feet and Wildcard. I feel like those are my faves. This is just a girl boss album that I've been loving. Another artist or band that released an album in March was Fall Out Boy. They released their album So Much for Stardust. Haven't listened to this one as much because I've been listening more to Miley Cyrus and Daisy Jones and the Six, but it's still a very solid album from what I've heard. I will definitely continue to listen to this one this spring and summer and the rest of the year. Finally, Hozier made a comeback and released 3 new songs. Grandson released a new song, and I'm so excited because I'm seeing him live in October, and I think that's it. So we were blessed with music, like 3 new albums to love and a bunch of singles, and then also the shows. That's it for this month's wrap up. So 7 books read and a lot of shows and music loved. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed. Please take care and I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye!
You gotta just go for it. Don't think about what comes